Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel, and this is a new AF chat. This is actually the second one in a series of 4 about A/B testing. So we started this before we knew that iOS 15 would bring A/B testing. Within iOS 15, decided to bring A/B testing, and we're super happy. So perfect timing, and I've been talking about A/B testing for who knows how long. So for me, this is very important. And with me, I have Gilad, Gilad, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself in your
Of
own words?
course. Sure thing. My name is Gilad. I'm the CEO and founder of Moburst. We are the mobile growth agency of small clients like Google, Uber, Samsung, Dropbox, and some of those pretty significant beasts with billions of users. And the idea in here is to try to share with you some of the things that we've learned on how to do A/B testing effectively with all of the different components of that, of the kind of the screenshots and the icon and the videos, and that's so many different ways that you can actually run a test and what to test. So the idea is to just be able to share some of that content with you guys and trying to make to bring you as much value as possible.
And there's a lot of content to be shared. I've seen it, and I know it's going to be great. So the idea behind this entire series that we started the last month was to introduce you to A/B testing, the concept, the ideas behind it, the more theoretical stuff, all the way to the nitty-gritty of how to do it, how to measure, which will come later in the series, and also how to do very specific things that will also come later in the series. But today we're doing the thing that I think is going to be very exciting and probably most exciting. We're going to actually do it. And Gilad has done so many A/B tests and has so much knowledge that we can't even contain into a single hour of webinar. So we're going to try to go through as much as we can without overwhelming. But Gilad is also not new to our AF chats. If you actually, we didn't publish those videos yet, I should say, but Gilad has joined us in our physical, in real life events a few years ago, multiple times. We did one at the AWS event space in New York City, and that was great. We talked about keywords, and then we did another panel on A/B testing or stuff related to A/B testing at the Twitter offices in New York City again, and that was great. So thank you for joining us, Gilad. I know this is going to be amazing, and I am very excited about everything that's to come. So just to recap, in case you haven't seen or you haven't been involved in the first webinar in this series, we talked to Katie from StoreMaven, who's an A/B testing platform, and she kind of introduced the idea of A/B testing and why it's not even a question of whether you should do it, it's a how to do it. It's not a Boolean true or false. Should I do it? Should I not do it? It's more like, how do I do it? And what can I expect from it? And so with all of that, we talked about that in great detail last month. Now comes a time to say, how do I actually do it? And I've talked to a bunch of developers, and their main question is, how? I understand maybe I need to do it, but what can I test? What should I test? Is there something better than something else? There are a whole bunch of elements. There are a whole bunch of different ways. And it becomes so overwhelming that I think some people just forget about it and say, I'll do it later. And the I'll do it later never happens. So today we're going to take you through pretty much all the steps, all the tools, and really all the things that you can A/B test and why you should A/B test them. And a lot of it will be made possible by iOS 15. And that's kind of the exciting bit. So can you talk a little bit more about what is going to be available on iOS 15 and the way that you would use it?
Yeah, of course. I think that we even have a very short video to kind of show you. I think that it's less than 20 seconds, but I think that it's definitely going to be kind of a great opener for this specific part. So basically, if you're thinking about before iOS 15, what we have currently is that we have two gates. We have the paid and the organic, and it's identical, basically. Like all of the users coming from different places to the exact same experience. And that's how it goes. When you're thinking about after iOS 15, the experience is going to be very, very different. So from now on, we will have 3 different gates for the organic side, which we will be able to test 3 different variants comparing to the main store asset. So we will be able to conduct A/B testings on iOS itself. And on top of that, you'll have 35 different gateways for the paid, which means specific users with specific intent will be able to get into a very tailor-made experience. So just for example, if I'm thinking about bringing users from Facebook or from TikTok, males or females, different type of things that the users are really kind of want to find in your app, and the entire experience could be modified exactly based on their search queries. And that's a very, very big change. So instead of having one gateway for all of the users, organic and paid, you're actually going to end up with 39 different options. And that's how meaningful it is to actually use that. And the reason that Apple is doing it, just because they saw so much of the bigger guys in the industry that are keep on testing and modifying and getting a more personalized experience. And it seems like that's something that will definitely continue with us in the coming year, and will become so much more prominent just because all of the other companies will basically modify each and every one of those experiences to the right audience. And based on that, obviously, the entire landscape will change. So I think that this is a very big move. I think that basically it changes. It's not about should I actually practice on A/B testing? It's about how to do the A/B testing in the most cost-effective way. I don't know, by the way, from the industry, anyone that's about to use 35 different options for the paid. Even the biggest spenders that we've met, they said, okay, we will start with 5, 10, I don't know, 15 different options. We won't gonna go 35 on day one. But the fact that you have so many slots to test, it just enables you a much more flexibility around those experiences.
And I've been trying to think about why 35 specifically. It's such an arbitrary number, 35. It could have been 27 or 48. Who knows? But I think it's definitely the flexibility that it will offer, especially if you want to do A/B testing outside of the store from paid traffic. That's going to make it so easy. So if you run 3 per A/B test, you can run at least 10 or 11 without a problem. 3 variations. So you still have that sort of ability. Not that you necessarily want to do it, but it's such a significant move of all the moves that Apple has made with the App Store. And they also recently changed the algorithm with keywords specifically. So I think iOS 15 is like the biggest update that we've seen in a long, long time from the marketing standpoint, from the promotion standpoint, from the let's get some download standpoint. And maybe it has something to do with subscriptions and wanting to get more subscription apps into the store because they work very well on both ends. There are a lot of maybes, but I love it. I love it. So you've been running A/B tests for quite a while. How many A/B tests do you think you've run out of curiosity?
I assume around anywhere between 1,000 to probably 1,500-ish.
Oh, wow.
And again, we are in the course of the last 8 years, we were dealing both with startups that are very nimble, very agile, trying to move really fast and test. If that works, great. If that doesn't work, dump that and move to the next one. And we also work with companies that are very, very, very heavy. 13 decision makers need to approve each and every step of the testing. They're speaking with their branding team and the legal team, and like each and everything there is being kind of scrutinized based on the creativity and also on all of the other things that you need to pay attention for. But when working with both small, medium, and large companies, each and every one of them has their own kind of journey about how they're actually doing the testing and how they're approving those new assets. And what does that mean on the brand guidelines? And what does that mean on all of the different things? Should we actually use characters if it's a game? Should we actually use more of kind of focusing on the real people that are actually experiencing the app? Should we actually just focus on the UI of the product? You have so many different approaches and so many different things that you can test. And the idea behind it is that we never know what we don't know before we actually testing it. A very small change from portrait to landscape, only the orientation, can get you 39% higher conversion rate, which is something that we saw in our own eyes when we were shocked by that. Exactly the same type of design, just orientation differently, and also just changing the screenshots order or changing the font size can make a very significant impact. So at the end of the day, the idea is to see kind of what are the things what are the hypotheses that we are coming to the table with, and trying to iterative, keep on doing it again and again and again. And every time you're winning, okay, another 2%, another 5%, you'll have wins of another 15%, another 20%, which will be huge, and we will celebrate them. But you'll also have a lot of different tests that, it's not statistically significant. So you can't really know if you should actually go with A or B, or it's not that meaningful if you're going with A or B. This is usually when you're doing the smaller changes. So again, there are a lot of best practices there, and I think that when you're thinking about the reasons that Apple even bring you that ability, I think that Google Play allow you now to do that for almost 2 or 3 years of actually A/B testing the different screenshots on the Google Play experiments, and Apple is kind of behind. Apple never likes to be behind, so now, okay, they're giving you only 3, we'll give you 3 plus 35. So, you know, who has who's the more innovative now? I think that this is part of the fun war between iOS and Android.
Absolutely. So several things. So thing number one is I actually wrote a guide about 16 different things you can A/B test. So if you have, hopefully after this, you'll have all the ideas, but if you still need any more ideas or suggestions, we'll drop that in the chat, because that's probably one of our most successful guides that we've written in the last year plus. And two, if you have any questions, throw them into the Q&A. There's a Q&A button somewhere on the bottom of your screen, I believe. If you throw them in there, we can take a look and we can answer them as we talk about everything else. That's going to be a great place to keep them. So we have the ability to test. There are a few different things to test. There are a few different ways to test them. Where do you start?
Yeah, so I think that we created this type of a slide that can actually help to guide the audience. Basically, there are 3 different main assets that we can play with: screenshots, video, and icon. Now, screenshots, obviously, you can play with even the number of screenshots, like how many of them. If you're thinking about 3 screenshots all the way to 10 on iOS or 8 on Android, that's something that you can play with. On the video section, you have up to 3 videos on iOS, for example, only 1 on Android. But those things are definitely making very significant impact on the conversion rate, just because the experience is very different. And also, when you're thinking about the icon, that's another thing that's definitely worth testing. Now, what can we test with them? It's all of that huge list, like the design style, the order of the unique selling proposition, of what's in it for the user, the different call to actions on each and every one of those screenshots, the messaging in general, how to actually show if the user is only going to be there for 3 to 6 seconds to make a decision to download or to drop. How do we make that very, very meaningful for them? The font size, it's really, really crazy to see that a lot of different companies just using too small of a font, and because of that, users will not read the text. So they're writing a lot of text in a very small font, and people will just skim through that instead of actually reading what it is that you prioritize to write there. Colors, obviously, is always a very big topic. When you think about highlighting the UI itself, it's another thing that just like replacing UI with a more interesting type of UI there, and not just taking screenshots of a clear screen, but actually something that has something meaningful to show the experience. Portrait, again, landscape, all of the orientation is very, very meaningful, just because the users will be able to consume the content in a different way. The resolutions that on Android, you can actually have not just portrait or landscape, you can have cubes, you can have whatever you want on Android. On Android, you can have it, besides rounded screenshots, you can do almost whatever you want. You can have screenshot, landscape, and then cube, one after the other in the same set, and it works. Like it's something that Android will allow you to upload, while on iOS, you need to choose or portrait or landscape. The backgrounds have another very meaningful way. A lot of times the background are kind of getting a very confusing contrast, so the text is not that readable. So that's another thing that's definitely worth testing around. The number of screens that you're using, the length of the video on Android. On iOS, it must be up to 30 seconds. On Android, you can have a 5-minute video. Is that the right fit? Not at all, but that's just something that you can also play with. You can test the search page and the app page itself, which are 2 different formats of looking at how your screenshots will look on the storefront. Seasonality improvement, which is always a very big thing from September till December, to make sure that you are ready for the Christmas, the holiday season, all of those festive times, that you can actually get another 5% increase or a 7% increase of the same set, just making it more festive. And then obviously custom audiences, which becomes very, very significant now with iOS 15, of seeing specific audience, only males from age of 30 to 35 that really follow Rihanna, going to this specific set and actually have something related to Rihanna in those in the first 2 screenshots, and now it's kind of a perfect fit for that specific audience, and that's for the paid side. So there are a lot of components there, and each and every one of them is can actually generate significant improvements.
That's a lot of stuff.
yeah, it's heavy, and it's heavy because at the end of the day, you need to come up with hypotheses about where to start. And I think that this is kind of the main question of where to start, how to actually take it toward the right direction when you have so many things to choose from. And these are just some of the ideas that when we're thinking about it. So you asked a lot about kind of best practices of okay, we have all of those options, great. Where do we actually start? And that's why we are usually kind of focusing on this type of a pyramid to try to kind of optimize it toward the right direction and a more effective placement of how we found testing working for us. So from one end, if you're thinking about the design style, this is the one thing that will change the design in the most meaningful way. If you're focusing just, for example, only on the user experience, how they will look like when they will use the app. If it's a utility app, for example, we can focus on the fact that, let's say if it's a Uber Eats, it gives you the delivery, it gives you the food. So should we focus on the food? Should we actually focus on the user getting the food, opening the door and having whatever they're craving on? Should we just focus on many different types of food? Should we actually focus on showing the UI and how easy it is to order? Like, you have so many different ways of thinking about how to position the product. And I think that the design style is one of the things that is kind of the most important in the beginning to understand what works better for us, illustration or real people. What works better for us? They're focusing on the UI or focusing on a very specific type of benefits. Once we have that sorted, and that's kind of the first test that we are crafting. Usually we are crafting an ABC testing. So what you have in the store against two other options. Once we have that sorted, then we are going to the messaging. We are kind of diving much deeper into which values to highlight. Or let's say we now know that the real people work better than illustration. Great. Now let's try to optimize towards that. Let's double down on the real people and focus on how to tell the story there. Maybe shifting the order of the values. Maybe shifting, even if we know that real people, okay, great. Which real people should we actually showcase there? I remember a test that when we actually shifted from brunette to blonde, actually got us 4% higher conversion rate. Now, does that mean that that's the right way to go with all apps? Like, go with bronze? No, but that's how when you're thinking about dating apps or things like that, showing someone that looks like a model or showing someone who looks like a regular person. And that's also a test that we saw very surprising results, where we actually saw that the non-models actually perform better because more people can actually relate to this is not just, again, selling you a dream. This is real people that are actually using the product. So then actually, after kind of figuring the design style, playing with the messaging and the order of the messaging and all of the things around the which language to use and how to actually communicate that language, then we are going to the fine tuning of, okay, this is the right design style for us. This is how the messaging actually relates best to our users. And now let's just do the fine tuning. Or let's just change the font size or again, portrait and landscape, orientation, highlighting the UI with different types of UI from the app, order the messaging. And this is kind of an iterative process that keeps on going on and on. And the idea is to keep on getting better and better. But I think that the biggest changes usually are around the design style, and then the messaging can actually give you another, let's say, 50% of what the design style can actually deliver you, and then keep on optimizing that can actually deliver you a very significant value, but it won't going to be as significant as kind of finding the right type of design style, if you will.
And I think that's if you think about the idea behind A/B testing, if you just think I'm going to run this test, I'm going to know everything, the answer is probably not. And so thinking about it like that, like start at the top. What's the biggest kind of most coarse thing that you can change, and then slowly zooming in and zooming in and zooming in. There's an example coming soon that will really explain how to do that with real screenshots. But when you think about it, if you had to run one A/B test for an app that you have not run any A/B tests for before, and you may even not know the industry all that well, where would you start? What's kind of the one thing that you would change, that you would recommend changing without having to think twice? Is it the background? Is it What would it be? And if the answer is I don't know, that's a very plausible. But what's kind of like your go-to, I would say.
I have to say that I have a problem inside of our organization. We always have the favorites, the things that we like the most. The problem is that usually they lose. So the fact that the most beautiful things usually are not performing as well as the uglier thing, and I don't know how to explain it in better words, but we keep on finding the things that the brand team is in love with usually don't actually convert the best way possible. And I think that's the idea behind testing, is that, again, we really don't know. The fact that my team is loving it and your team loves it doesn't mean anything. The question is how the conversion in the App Store will actually look like. And a lot of apps, the very basic approach of actually showing a screenshot within a device and then a text on top of it, in a lot of the apps, it actually wins. Now, is that the most beautiful way or the right way to present the product? Not necessarily, but a lot of times we found in a lot of different apps that actually basic works for a lot of the different products. Even when you're going with basic, is it tilted devices? Is it kind of a bold background, or just a brand photos background, or even a white background? Again, a lot of different times you'll find very different types of results. So some of the apps, when you're actually going with the more sophisticated design, and I'll show you some examples, it will get you tremendous growth. But sometimes in specific apps, people don't want to see more ad-looking screenshots. They just want to see how the product looks like. So if it looks like it's trying too much, they will say, okay, they're trying to sell me, and the conversion will drop. And I don't understand why that is till the end, but at the end, I'm looking at the numbers and saying, okay, it's not a crappy design. It's a beautiful design, but it doesn't convert well on the App Store. So we can use that design template on the ads. We can use that on many other things if you like it, but we don't want to put something that actually reduces the conversion rate in the App Store. So these are some of the learnings. So I don't have the silver bullet for you. I don't have, hey, use black background or blue or red. It's not. I wish it was that simple, but usually it's much more kind of challenging than that. We have best practices of, minimal font size, for example, and things like that. That if it's on portrait, if it's landscape, it's different kind of minimal font size, but we want to make sure that the readability, you have a very big contrast between the text and the background. That's key always. If you have kind of this blended, you're showing kind of an image of a person, something like that, and then you have the text, and then the text is some of the text color is some of it on a very light background and some of it on a very dark background. It's harder to read, and because of that, most of the users will not read. And then if you don't want them to read, just don't put text. But if you want them to read it, obviously make sure that the contrast is the right contrast.
That makes a lot of sense. Katie from Storm even said the same thing when I asked a very similar question. And so this is starting to make a lot of sense now. And there isn't a go-to. And she also said something similar to what the team likes isn't usually what ends up winning. And I think that's a good key point, because when it comes to keywords, it's pretty much the same. What you think might work is not necessarily going to be it. And so if you are only going with gut, you're probably not going to maximize what you can get out of the store. And A/B testing is the way to fix that. I brought this example up in the last one too. Every time we send an email, we run an A/B test. It's built in, it's baked in, it's a whole system, it's a part of our workflow. And honestly, at least half the time, most of what I thought would work, and also what most of other marketers believe would work, like how you include emojis and promotions and things of that nature, they don't. Not for us, at least. So if we were to just go with our gut, we'd probably lose a whole bunch of opens and clicks. And that's the same thing that we see here. There is a question that I think is relevant, and we'll probably see a lot more of as more of this A/B testing stuff in iOS 15 comes up. And that is, if you run tests on Google Play and you get those results, can you translate them over, just copy and paste them into the App Store and get good results?
Don't. Absolutely not. We had so many clients saying, hey, this is how we work till now. And we told them, okay, we understand that this is how you work till now. We want to actually do tests on StoreMaven or Split Metrics on iOS, and actually using Google Play experiments for Google for sure. Again, we don't want to burn traffic if you don't have to. And then those tests are much more expensive when you actually need to run them on a testing platform, because you need to buy traffic, statistical significance, getting 5,000 samples each for making sure that this is the right type of direction. But when we are looking at it, we've done that with, I think that the latest case was with Discovery. And Discovery, we worked on 4 different products. On each and every one of those products, we've done probably around 3 to 6 tests every quarter. And when we've done those tests, we saw, okay, we had the exact same design win on Android by 16%. We said, okay, amazing, let's put it on Android. Then the marketing director there said, okay, if that works so much better on Android, let's at least test it also on iOS. I said, of course, let's test it. She said, maybe just implement it in the next version. I said, no, we have to test it before implementing something. I understand on Android it works amazingly. It's the same design. I agree with you that it makes sense to take the learnings from here to there. And when we actually ran a test for that, we saw that it will actually decrease the conversion rate on Android by 4%. On exactly the same set, exactly the same design, the same ratio, each and everything identical, just changing from a Samsung device to an iOS device because we need to be compliant with the stores themselves. So you can never take learnings from one platform to the other. It makes sense to test those things, but you can't just go and implementing that because it worked on one of them. You can, but this is the way to also lose a lot of conversion in the process. And it will make our life so much easier. If we can just test on one platform, getting those learnings, it will be easier for us as marketeers. We always want the easier path. Unfortunately, the storefront itself looks different. How many screenshots you can actually see on iOS and Android if you're thinking about the structure itself. And that's something that we can actually show. The layout is very, very different. And that's probably the reason why you have different results on iOS and Android. I have a nice slide about that can actually take a second. This is how you can see screenshots on iOS. So you have portrait and landscape. You have 2 different layouts. You have the search page and the app page. But basically, if you're looking at it, this is kind of the place that you can play with. And screenshots, let's say on the app page itself, you have one screen and let's say screen 0.4 that is going to be seen. And on the landscape, it will look very similar. But when you're thinking about it on Android will have this type of a layout. So the layout itself, when you're thinking about the experience, when you're thinking about how the screens are looking like, on the app itself, on the app page itself, you have 3.5 screens and not 1.4, which means how much of the story will be visible on Android and iOS is different just because of the layout of the storefront itself. And I'm not even speaking about, how you can actually play with it on portrait landscape, what happens when you actually bring it to cubes and like many, many other orientations. We won't go all the way into that, but taking the same exact type of approach for both iOS and Android usually is the wrong idea to go.
That absolutely makes sense. And there's a follow-up question we can get to a little bit later, but there's another question that I think also makes sense to answer. And that is, how big are your A/B tests? How many people, or how big of a percentage, or how do you know what to choose?
So I think that basically I'm always looking at the potential based on the numbers. So how many organic downloads you're getting each and every day. Or how many you're actually getting on a monthly basis. So let's assume if you are getting 10,000 organic downloads or 10,000 downloads in general on a monthly basis, comparing to the fact that you're getting 500,000, the potential of getting, let's say, 30% uplift on the conversion rate is very doable. But then on a 10,000, it means that it can actually get you, let's say, 30% better. Okay, you're getting, instead of 10,000, now you're getting 13,000. It's still significant, but it's not as significant when you have 500,000, and then the 30% uplift is massive. So I always say that it needs to be proportional to the media budget of how much you're about to spend. If you're about to spend $100,000 throughout the entire year for the marketing, okay, another 20-30% uplift, it's really nice, but it won't going to be that game changer. And then the question becomes, how much it costs of actually creating all of those assets and testing them, comparing to the value of how those things will actually look like later on. And on the other side, if you're having millions of downloads per year, or you're about to invest millions of dollars of promoting the app, and you're not optimizing the storefront, you're just losing a huge value. So it's always a question like, it needs to be proportional to your organic reach that you have, and it needs to be proportional to how much you're spending on user acquisition in general. Based on those two numbers, we have like a lot of different calculators. I won't going to go too deep into that, but we have calculators of best practices of how often should you actually test, and also on which languages you should test, on what type of storefronts, because at the end of the day, if most of your traffic comes from the US and Japan, for example, Japan needs a very different treatment than the US. It's a whole different type of optimization project because the Japanese culture is very different than Western culture. So we need to really dive into the data and then coming up with the right testing approach for that specific case. It's I'm sorry, it seems like any question that you're asking, it sounds like it's complex, but it is. Like, it really depends on the situation itself with each and every one of those products.
No, that's absolutely true. And I kind of, the reason I ask these kind of high level generic questions is basically to drive the point home that while you being a developer or anyone, a marketer, might think that it's A/B testing is just one thing. You know, you turn on a test and that's it, you get results and you move on. It's not. It's a series of things. And that's, if you think about it, it is an iteration as opposed to just a yes or no. And you think about every iteration giving you more information and every iteration being just a little bit different, then all these questions are not really relevant. Because one iteration can be one thing and another can be another. And you don't have to ask, should I test one thing or another? Test both. And I think that's the mindset that I like to think in, because one, you can't be wrong when you do that. You can have failed tests or failed experiments, and that's normal. I think the more you test, the more you'll have both successes and failures. But you really have to think about, I want to test another thing and another thing and another thing and another thing. And in Japan, I want to really understand the culture and test what makes sense for Japan. And again, that also is an iterative type of thing. And I think that's, if we had the question last time of whether you should do this yourself or whether you should go with an agency. And the answer is, how much time are you willing to put into this? Because it's such an iterative process and because you need to run so many tests. You mentioned 3 or 4 tests per quarter. Quarter is only 3 months, 3 or 4 tests. That's at least 1 test a month. That's a lot of assets. That's also a lot of thinking that you have to put into this and a lot of analysis. And if you want to really do this right, you want to continue iterating. And then that's just one store, one location, one language, and you can expand from there. But I think the iterative mindset, to me, that's the win. How you do the testing, that's something, the more you iterate, the better you do it. Everything else just wins from there. So that's kind of if there is one takeaway from this, other than which colors are going to be more successful, which I know people want to know. There's even a question about that, but it's more about that should not be the question, because which color is more successful should be an A/B test you run blue, green, and red and see which one works, and run a shade of blue and a shade of a different blue, and then run a shade of green and see what happens with that. So I think that's to me, that's the most important thing. And if, like I said, if there's one main takeaway, it's, don't think about kind of absolutes. Think about the iterations that you can make to get to what absolutely works for your app or game. So I think next, what I really want to get into that example or the set of examples that you have, because I think that will drive this point home. How do you, once you have the idea, you set a strategy, you know that you want to, I think at the high level, you want to get more downloads. So you want to attract more people and convert those page views into downloads. What does that look like now?
Amazing. So this is a kind of a great example because you all know this app. I assume that I don't think that there are a lot of people in the world that don't know Google Maps. So just for example, when you're thinking about Google Maps, when we actually started to engage with them, it was I think 5 years ago. We started with brand colors, and this was kind of the best practices. Okay, we're Google, we have these brand colors. This is what we're using live in the App Store. We're not even thinking about it. That's how we communicate about our products. And when we started to ideate, and I think that this is very different than the question of should it be blue or red, or like, these are not hypotheses from the way that I look at it. This is kind of optimization for the winner set. Okay, should it be darker blue or lighter blue? It's a good question to ask once you found your winner. But I think that we need to kind of focus what's in it for the user. Why should the user that has 3 to 6 seconds to invest in your app and then tapping on the back button and actually going to your biggest competitor and seeing them, why what would capture his eyes and actually make him go with us and not with another product? Even if it's a huge brand like Google Maps, for example, how meaningful those tests can be. Like, who doesn't know Google Maps? If someone needs Google Maps, they will come to the App Store and download it. But we found that it was very different than what we envisioned in the beginning. So we started with the brand colors because that's what they had live in the App Store. So that was serving as our control. We said, well, Google Maps is something that it's on the go. If it's on the go, let's show that it's on the go on different places around the world. That shows you that wherever you navigate to, you can actually go there with maps. Then the more advanced type of approach that we really strive to get to was let's show all of the possibilities of how to drive. So you can drive by foot, by car, by bus, by bicycle, no matter how you go with maps. And actually the brand colors are still in here on the lower part. So we might be next to that as well. And showing kind of the layout of if that's the App Store for the US, let's just show, the Statue of Liberty. So let's show something that's very hyper local. This was our hypothesis of what we think that could be the most beautiful set. And it ended up winning very significantly. Because it's Google and NDAs, I won't be able to share the specific numbers. But it was a very significant wins comparing to those two. The challenge that we had then was, wait a minute, now we need to localize it. And Google Maps works around all of the world. And when you think about localization, it's a huge headache when you need to actually localize such a specific items. So let's continue iterating. Let's try to see if we can actually get that as our new control and beat that before we're actually going through the crazy work of localizing it. So we tested that with tilted devices. We tested that with a blended background. So like this type of background, if that wins, will be the easiest to actually transfer for all around the world because everyone has this type of background behind it. It could actually be relevant for each and every city, each and every country. And no matter what we've done, we couldn't beat that test. So after it was very heartbroken for the team there, they said, okay, it performs so much better. We can't afford to miss out that potential. Let's start to localize. So when we've localized, even when you think about English-speaking countries, you would see that English-speaking countries behave differently. So in the US, for example, you can be more wordy. In the UK, you actually need to be more concise and to the point. So just for example, in the US, get there faster with like traffic updates comparing to however you move with maps and be one step ahead. This is kind of the main reason in the UK, even though that it's the same app. Now you can see in here that the background, changing the Big Ben to Statue of Liberty or stuff like that. That's something that, again, just to make it consistent, the buses in the UK are different than the buses in the US. So that's kind of a very simple localization. But when you're actually diving it into Italy or Germany, for example, so changing the brunette to blonde or changing things around the different elements, obviously within the UI of each and every one of those sets, that's something that is really meaningful and making sure that we are making the localized copy and captions and screenshots and obviously the layout itself. And then what happened is that we had a winner, and that winner was this one, which was the control. We localized it for all of the different countries, and we saw that it was working really effectively. Having said that, we run a lot of other A/B testings with other Google products, and we saw, and not just with Google products, we worked with Google probably on more than 30 of their key apps in many different localizations, and we start seeing this trend of landscape performs better than portrait. So we said, okay, let's test it on Google Maps as well, even though that testing for maps was over. Let's again, we created probably around 15 different sets. We found a winner. We were happy with that. It was performing really nicely. Let's try to test it also on landscape. And when we actually tested it on landscape, one time the phone was on the left and the other time the phone was on the right. And the phone on the left actually got us a very significant impact. I'm talking about more than 20%. I can't mention the specific number, but more than 20% just flipping it from portrait to landscape. And because of that, that was the set of screenshots for the next 2 years. So these type of things, like when you're going to the App Store and you're just seeing screenshots, you have no idea what type of process and iterative process have gone through in order to reach that level of asset. And it could look like very simplistic for you. Like if you're looking at it, okay, it's nicely designed, but you have no idea how much thought went into each and every one of those elements. Showing the diversity, showing the ethnicities, showing the different elements, focusing on the UI, testing the different messaging on each and every element, how much it was tested and thought of in order to achieve this level of results. And I can only mention that this specific test of Google Maps probably created an uplift of more hundreds of millions of dollars for Google Maps. And obviously, you know, when you're one of the largest apps in the App Store consistently, this is how the impact could be. So obviously for other clients of ours, we found a lot of different of those type of iterative processes that generate. Sometimes it will only be 16% uplift. Sometimes it will be all the way to 50% uplift. But it can range on that magnitude, and it's a very significant thing, especially if your user acquisition budget is significant. Think about how you would feel like to get 50% more downloads by using the exact same budget, the exact same methodology that you're using on the user acquisition, just getting more results based on it. So that's kind of how the impact can look like.
That's wild. I mean, the idea. So we looked at how the screenshot changed drastically from the beginning to what they are now, but also just the idea that you can move one element on the screen and everything changes. That takes us back, I think, to that thought from before. If you think about if you have an expectation, your A/B test is probably not going to work well. If you have an expectation with the idea of iterating, your A/B test is going to be great. So I think if we're moving away from the what should I test or how should I test it or what colors are best, and we think about specifically how iterations make a difference, the real thought is just how do you go from the first idea and how do you know what to refine? What do you usually, what's your process like for knowing, okay, so we changed the colors and we had this uplift or this failed. What do you do next? How do you go from one to the next?
So I have to say that usually when we are running a test, and this is something that iOS 15 from one end will give us a testing platform that allow us on the App Store itself to test things. But I always look, and I learn the most usually from our failures and not from our success. So usually, if we have two other competitive sets comparing to the current one, and we are using split metrics, or we are using StoreMaven as kind of a testing platform, what I'm trying to understand is how many of the users that are decisive users that are just making a direct decision to download or to drop, how they are looking at the first two screenshots, and that's kind of what usually they're getting their decision made, comparing to the ones that are the explorers that are actually going through all of the different sets and then trying to understand, okay, is this the right app for me or not? They're looking for a specific feature, or they're looking for a specific thing to make the decision of going to the next app just like after you, or actually downloading this specific product. And when we are looking at the data, a lot of times you will be able to benchmark each and every one of the sets. So it's not just A is better than B, let's go with A. That's the obvious thing. But why A is better? Where the users made the decision with A comparing to B. We had a test where we actually created one set of 10 screenshots for a very big a client of ours that was a startup that actually managed to raise now another $250 million. We helped them to grow through a round to B round to C round to D round. It's an amazing adventure with them. And when we have gone through the process, we really pushed on saying, this specific value proposition, we understand that this is not the key for your brand. This is not what you think that will make users excited about that. But we still want to have it as the 9th screenshot. Now, most of the users will not even see that because it's the 9th screenshot. It's only the explorers if they will make a decision to actually go for that or not. And we saw that specific, the 9th screenshot had the highest conversion rate throughout the entire set to the explorers. And that actually, we showed that to their CMO. The CMO said, well, you know what? This is not how users are using the app, but it seems like the best hook to get them to download. And if that's the best hook to get them to download, let's do that. Let's shift it into the second screenshot and making it much more prominent and showing how you can actually utilize the app also in this specific direction. So I think that the learnings is what usually guides us about the next hypothesis about how to test. Like if we see just, for example, that B is better performing than C, great. But what works better in the losing set comparing to the winner that we have? And then if the 4th screenshot has a very big drop-off point, let's work on that. If the 2nd screenshot was better on the other set, let's use those kind of insights and get from that a lot more ways of actually becoming more data-driven in our hypothesis of what to test next. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you, again, we're going back to this whole iteration. The idea is you try and you try and you try. And this is not also the first time that we're hearing about learning from failures, more so than successes. We had an AF chat about about competitive intelligence, and it was really the same thing. If you look at everything that didn't work, why didn't it work? Because why it worked, you can always easily explain. There's always something. Success always has this sort of positive, I'll figure it out. But it's the failures that teach you so much. So if the more you test, the more you fail, but the more you fail, the more you learn, the more you learn, the more you succeed. So it's all positive. There's an interesting question in the chat, actually, not in the Q&A, about how often do you retest? So something works. You're saying that the Google Maps screenshots were on for 2 years. What made when did the decision come to, let's try this again?
Yeah, so I think that the best practices is definitely not keeping it like that for 2 years, but it really depends on the budget and priorities. Usually, when you're getting a very significant impact, when you're getting something that is, not a 2% uplift, but actually, very significant impact. I can't speak about that specific example with the numbers, but basically when you're getting something that is, widely spreaded, and also they use that as kind of case studies internally for other products about how impactful that could be. And basically they fall in love in that specific set later on, and decided that they just want to keep it as is. Now, usually once every 6 months, even if you had something that won, you can keep on trying to get it, to a better stage. And that's how usually most of our clients are actually looking at screenshots. So it's not one asset that just stay there. A lot of times that you have new features that are added and new things that change, and the competitions are actually speaking about themselves a bit differently. So you want to alter yourself as well. And if they're highlighting those specific things, then they're also a data-driven company, and we can see that they went from this to that, we can understand that they probably made that decision because it worked better for them. So we can have some learnings that are free learnings for us. And then do we want to incorporate that in our new strategy or not? These are the type of things that we are looking at it. Usually to create their first set of actually getting it to a stable place where you feel like you're maximizing this asset. That's, that's stage one. From that moment on, you have kind of, how do we get it to a better place and a better place? Then you also feel like, okay, the next test will only give me like 2%, 3% uplift, 5% uplift. Will it be worth it to continue iterating? But that's usually how you're creating a lot of different tests in the beginning, getting into a very stable place. And a lot of products are evolving and the brands are evolving, and then they change the brand guidelines and new things, there are new characters coming to that specific app. So it's something that it's just need to keep on being alive, just like the rest of your product features and the roadmap of development. It's that type of an asset. You won't going to invest as much as you invested in the beginning to get it to a steady state, but you will need to renew it every 6 months, in the worst case, every year, to continue iterating. And if you'll see that it's still best performing, amazing. Don't change it, but at least make sure that you're trying to challenge it, because sometimes smaller changes can actually make a very significant impact if you didn't change the screenshots for a long time. We saw that also over and over again.
That makes a lot of sense. And again, it goes back to really the beginning and the idea that you should test consistently as long as it makes sense for you. Now, you talked a lot about big budgets and small budgets and a lot of downloads and few downloads. And I think it's always a balancing act between how much effort you can put in, and whether that's with your budget, with your time, depends on how you do it, and also what you would like to get out of it. So if you're doing this yourself and you spent a week redoing all the assets and you got 10 downloads extra out of it, something else needs to happen. Maybe you spent some time unnecessarily. But if you're just starting out and 10 downloads means doubling the downloads, that could be a good starting point for something. And I think that's why iOS 15 bringing these sort of tests right into the platform is going to be key, because you shouldn't expect huge uplift immediately if you've never done this before. But any sort of uplift, meaning any sort of positive improvement, is really the beginning. And if we're thinking about this iteratively, I can say that, then we're iterating and iterating and iterating. So maybe a test is going to get you a little bit of results, and then you're going to change how you do it, and then it's going to give you more results. So as long as you continue to iterate, you will get to a point where the iterations now make sense, meaning the iterations are now more stable and you don't have to test every little thing. You also build the wisdom. So I think really, because you don't have to go and spend thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands on testing anymore with iOS 15, just on the infrastructure, just on the tools, now you can try it. And we talked about, you said 6 months, a year to change your screenshots. That sounds pretty reasonable even to small developers. I mean, we can do that pretty easily. We can replace them far more often and that will give us a lot of learning, especially for running everything as an A/B test. And that's kind of what I learned over time as I've been doing A/B tests for the last whole bunch of years. Kind of like always run with an A/B test. There's no reason not to if you have the bandwidth to actually run that A/B test, meaning to look at the results. And there are a few questions in the chat and Q&A about how do you see the results. They're all going to be available in App Store Connect. Eventually, we'll also have all that data coming from App Store Connect, so you will be able to see it. The granularity and other things remains to be seen. I can guess what it's going to be like based on everything I know about Apple, but I don't want to make those guesses because who knows, maybe Apple will surprise us again. But I think at the end of the day, we'll have enough information to tell what works and what doesn't. And so
you'll always have the winners. The problem is, will they go the deeper way, just like StormAven or Splitmetrics, and actually give you a database on each and every screen out of the screenshots? Probably not. And that if you're making very big changes, you might still want to use a test platform just to get those insights of why it happened. It's not just, okay, B is better than A, but why? Yeah. Okay, the third screenshot has the lowest conversion rate. Let's flip that instead of actually changing the entire sequence of it. I really hope that it's a start that they will ending up giving us that data on App Store and Google Play Store. Currently, you don't have that, so you need to do tests to be able to figure it out if you're not running it with a research platform like StormAven or Splitmetrics.
And I think in a way, from everything we've seen, even our experience, I mean, we do something that used to be very similar to App Store Connect. That was the beginning. They give you the information you need, not necessarily all the information you need. So I think the future for something like StormAven and something like Splitmetrics is going to be wonderful, because more and more companies are going to be now seeing this and need this sort of information. But I also have a feeling that this is why 35 custom product pages exist, for the rare case that, you know, they want to integrate with this and make all this happen. And so I see, I think the future for the flexibility, the future of flexibility is going to be very strong. So the brands that want to take advantage of this and really go all the way, something along the lines of what you were describing, running tests all the time and learning from them, I think they're just going to get the downloads and they're going to see the uplift they need. There's a question in the chat that I think is really good. What would you consider your biggest failure in testing or A/B testing and experimenting?
So I have to say, I had a client that we've iterated for 9 different sets of screenshots and tested 9 different directions. Now, it was all based on the same brief of the client of what is their unique selling proposition, what's better for like using them instead of other apps. So we use that as kind of the same kind of testing ground. Okay, these are the unique selling propositions. Now it's a question of how to tell the story. And no matter what we've done, the horrible set that they had live was continuing to win it. Now, think about creating 9 different sets using art director, designer, copywriters, account managers, media to actually run all of those tests, analyze the results, and still keep on missing the target. We did manage, it was funny that it was only on the 10th attempt, we did manage to get them a very significant impact, but it was only after we changed the brief. And we found that the biggest problem was that the unique selling proposition of what they prioritized was very different than what they made us. So they said, this is what we have currently on the App Store, but we changed the brand guidelines, we changed who we are, we changed the main features of the app, and this is how we want to position it now. And no matter what we try to do, we couldn't get to what they had in the market is what the clients actually wanted from the way that of positioning. But when we needed to use different kind of look and feel and different kind of messaging, it didn't perform the results that they wanted to get. Only once we changed the brief and actually made them rethink about the brand guidelines, saying, let's at least get the winner and then get the understanding of what now are we doing with this new winner. Do we want to implement it or not? But let's at least prove that we can actually beat whatever that you have in the App Store that you hate so much. And when they saw that, it made them to rethink about the unique selling proposition, and that actually got us to the winner. But it was 9 fails, which is something that is happening very, very rarely. And the team each and every time coming up to that, getting the data. Okay, so this didn't work, but this can actually work, and then coming up with new hypotheses. All of the adrenaline. Okay, we want to make it successful, and no matter what we do, it keeps on failing. So it's hard, it's very rare, but it can definitely happen, especially when you're changing who you are or how you present yourself to the market. And look and feel is always dangerous.
That's crazy. That is That's perseverance, to continue and continue and continue with the no results, but also a lot of learning, because we said failure is learning. That's great. I think perseverance is probably a good thing to couple with iterations, because you're going to have to iterate and iterate and iterate and maybe get something. Cool. I think we are out of time, even though I know there are more examples and more things that we can talk about, and we didn't even get to all of the questions, but I really like this. I think this is very eye-opening. The examples just guide us through what it looks like to really think about A/B testing, and not just think as A/B testing changing blue to green, but more as A/B testing changing the background color, or is it changing a solid background to an image. And I think that's really how you get started. So as soon as iOS 15 ships, I really hope that everyone who's watching us now will at least try one thing. It can be a color. It can be the size of the font. It can be the image. It can be really anything. Hopefully more than just one thing. But that's the key. The key is you start with one, and then you continue and continue and continue. So thank you, Gilad, for showing us all of this. This is really eye-opening, even without any numbers or anything else. Just knowing what is happening is amazingly useful. I'm a very hands-on kind of person, so to me, seeing this is better than many theoretical guides and thoughts from other people. Hopefully, everyone else who's watching also enjoy this. And so thank you for joining us, Gilad. This, again, was amazing. And thank you, everyone, for joining us, even though for some of you, it's way past bedtime. Yeah. If you, so we'll wrap this up into a video, and we'll share this later, and we'll also share contact details in case you want to get in touch with Gilad or any other of the guides that we mentioned and all of those. So keep an eye out for an email probably next week. And on that happy note,
it was really fun. Thank you.
I'm glad. That's what we always aim for. And hopefully we'll see you again in a future one of these for all of those other slides that you have that we didn't get to. Cool. Alrighty. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Thank you for coming again, and we'll see you in the next one.